Now, movie number three, I saw when we got home. Now, I saw the ads for it before for months. There was ads last year for it. They sold out tickets last year for the 70 millimeter screening, and it's really hard to get those tickets. As someone who lives in New York, I've been trying to figure out when can I visit Lincoln Square to see a film in 70 millimeter IMAX. And every time a movie comes out, these scalpers get it before anybody else, and they put it on eBay and charge crazy amount of money just to see these movies in theaters. It's insane. I never thought I'll see the day when the movie experience becomes like the concert going experience. It sucks. The movie tickets coming out a year in advance. People are people are buying it before you can, just so they can resell it to you at a higher price. It's insane what's going on in the world of movies right now. Insane. But I can tell you one thing: there is a difference. There is a huge difference between seeing a movie in standard theatrical format and the IMAX format and IMAX 30 millimeter format. Now, I have never seen a movie in IMAX 30 millimeter, but I have seen plenty of movies in IMAX. I'm telling you, I've seen Michael Jackson's Thriller in IMAX. I'm telling you now, there's nothing like seeing a great production in IMAX. It is mesmerizing for the right production. There's some productions where I'm just like, that was not needed to be seen in IMAX. But during the right ones, there are some great experience to have in IMAX. But knowing that Christopher Nolan shot everything practically and real was eye opener. Some of these shots were just amazing to see in IMAX because this movie was shot specifically for IMAX. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this whole film was shot in IMAX, which is crazy because IMAX is not a lightweight camera. It's not a light camera to hold, and it makes a lot of noise. But somehow they shot a whole film on IMAX. Granted, this man had won Oscars. He made billions at the box office, so of course they'll let him do what he wants. But there were some shots in here where I was just like, oh, I see why this had to be seen in IMAX. I was looking at some of these shots and knowing that they shot a lot of this stuff for real. There was no like CGI. Like huge CGI in this film. Knowing that they wasn't going hard with the CGI in this film, it was a sight to be seen. And there was some shots with the water of the ocean, knowing that, especially after seeing Moana, which was filled with CGI ocean, and now watching the Odyssey where you've seen them in the real ocean, it was almost meditative. It was so soothing to see the water, to see the oceans. With some scenes, there was other scenes where it was just loud and just the water just clashing, and then it made me realize I definitely was hearing those tides while I was in the bathroom in Virginia. I was definitely hearing those tides in there. For our fifth lesson, I learned adaptation means translating the soul. A story survives thousands of years because of its core, not the surface details. So the question is, what is the human conflict? Why does this story matter? What emotions connect generations? The adaptation has to preserve the DNA while creating a new experience. Now, I've never read the book, but I've seen different adaptations, and I can tell you Christopher Nolan had his own vision for sure, which goes into our next lesson. Non-linear storytelling is not about confusing the audience. It's about controlling information. And I realized that watching The Odyssey that he really loved non-linear storytelling. And I think that goes back to his early film, Momentum. Nolan uses structure to control discovery. The audience experienced memory loss with the character in Momentum. In Dunkirk, we have three timelines that create suspense as they converge. In The Prestige, new information changes how you understood earlier scenes. So the lesson I got from this film was a great structure does not hide information from the audience. You gotta give them information at the most powerful moments. When adapting a myth, don't just tell the audience the story. Control when they discover the truth. Another lesson I got is about style. Christopher Nolan has a very specific style. When you watch his films from Batman, Oppenheimer, Tenet, The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan had very repeated decisions. His style comes from very large-scale compositions, characters surrounded by massive environments, practical filmmaking, cross-cutting, tension through editing, time as a storytelling device. A lot of cuts back and forth to the past, to the present. The lesson here, I guess, is a filmmaker develops style by repeating choices until the audience recognizes the language. So if I want to develop a style, I gotta repeat the same choices over and over until the audience recognizes my language.